Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the ProLingua Global podcast. My name is Gabriella Ferenzi and I run a language training company called ProLingua Global, and I run this podcast to talk with business people who have had their fair share of intercultural experiences either in the corporate sector or when working for a small or medium-sized business, or perhaps as an entrepreneur or solopreneur. In these interviews, you will hear them sharing their insights as to how understanding the language and culture of their partners, colleagues, or clients has benefited them or would have benefited them in their business relationships and their company. In this particular episode, I'm speaking with Tomas Svitorka, life coach, entrepreneur, founder of OK is Not Enough, which is the core philosophy he uses when coaching industry leaders, entrepreneurs, and people from all walks of life, really. Tomas lives in the UK and speaks English wonderfully, and we will find out from him how he learned the language initially, to the point where he felt that he had to relearn English alongside the culture when he moved to the UK. Tomas looks back on his native tongue, Czech, and reflects upon subtle cultural differences that he encountered since living and doing business here in the UK. We also talk about our massive respect for anyone trying to crack a language, especially a language that's not among the most common foreign languages like Czech. And at the end of our conversation, we addressed the perennial dilemma of whether we should ask the question, "Where are you from?" when meeting someone, a seemingly harmless and perfectly normal question. So now, without further ado, here is my interview with Tomas Svitorka. For accepting my invitation to be on our podcast, ProLingua Global's podcast. And I'd love to, I've introduced you already in the little intro section. I'd love you to introduce yourself too. So if someone asks you the question, what you do, what would be your response now?
Right, so I'm a life coach, and I work with entrepreneurs, decision makers, managers, for whom simply okay is not enough. Because okay is not enough, that's my own philosophy and philosophy of my coaching as well. I work with people who just want to squeeze more out of life.
What sort of people do you work these days?
So now I mostly work with entrepreneurs, professionals, and business owners. And hey, but I've been coaching for 5 years, and throughout the whole history, So throughout the 5 years, I work with anyone and everyone, really. Some people employ Burger King, and one of my clients now is celebrities, multimillionaires, and so on. But right now, these days, mostly with quite well-positioned professionals, but I don't really care about where people are in their current situation or in life. It's more about where they're heading to, their attitude towards life, and just squeezing more out of it.
Right. And where are they usually based? Like, are they in London, or are they in the UK, or anywhere in the world, really?
So I would say around 60% of my clients are based in London, and the rest are really scattered all around the world. So I got people from Spain, Portugal, Italy, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, client from the States, Norway, really anywhere around the world.
So I assume the common language would be English.
Oh, definitely. I only coach in English.
But I know that your language background is something else. So you are from the Czech Republic.
That's right. So I think what some people may find interesting, I'm actually originally from a little village of a couple of hundred people, sort of located up the hills in the middle of nowhere, in a corner of Czech Republic, so very tiny place.
And so your mother tongue must be Czech, I
Oh,
assume?
yeah, absolutely, yes. Yes, it is, yes.
And how did you learn English? I mean, I've been listening to you. I've been to some of your workshops, and so I've heard you talking on many occasions. And I have to say that your English is really fantastic, and you clearly speak fluently, and you work in the language. So how did you learn, first of all?
So I started learning English. Now that there's kind of throughout the story, there will be a hiccup. So I started learning English when I was quite small. I would say maybe 7, and I used to go to my grandma for, I remember these torturous hours in my grandma's place where she was teaching me English, and just very, very basics. And we could choose at school as well, English or German or French. And so I chose English, but so I started quite early on. And I moved to the UK when I was 21. And by the time I had English at the university as well. And when I was moving to the UK, I actually thought that my English was pretty good until I moved here. But when you get here, you realize that the English that you learned is kind of theoretical. It's a textbooky.
Wow.
But when you get here, no one speaks, hello, how are you? Like on these cassette tapes, that I learned from. You come to the UK and they ask you, you're right. And but people started talking, especially accents. And I was totally lost. So I've almost felt like I needed to learn from scratch. I would say I had vocabulary, but I didn't understand accents really. It was too fast. I was overpronouncing. I had terrible Czech accent. And so, yeah, so I've been learning English for a number of years, but the theoretical English is very different than from the practical one.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I've been through, similar experiences actually. I come from a German-Hungarian background. So I grew up with those two languages, but I learned English at school, but I couldn't really, I didn't feel that it was preparing me for a real life usage of the language. And
Yeah.
and then when we moved here in 2007, it was, so 10 years ago, 11 years ago. I had similar experiences. I couldn't pick up accents. I had trouble when I was talking on the phone. So I had a pretty good basic knowledge, but still I felt really useless. And I started to teach, which made things even more complicated because I had to juggle with 3 languages. But eventually I found that after a year or maybe 2, watching a lot of TV and socializing with locals, I found that I started to pick up accents. And it was a really interesting experience. And so you say basically that once you moved here, you had to relearn the whole story.
Yeah, and I was quite lucky because 13 years ago, my first move in here, I was an au pair, and I was kind of helping out in a very good family, very educated, so they had a very good English, and they were actually kind enough for me to they sorted out for me to go to college just to learn English even more, and so that really helped as well. But I must say, one of the key, I was so frustrated that my English was so bad. I got this wake up slap, coming here thinking, yeah, I'm fine, I'm cool. And then realizing like, holy moly, I don't really understand a word. So what I promised to myself is that I wouldn't have any Czech friends for the first few years, and I didn't. So it prevented me from speaking Czech. And that really helped because I used to work in a couple of years after I moved here. I work in a catering company, and There were um, uh, sort of other catering and other kind of services, vending machines, and all that stuff, workers, and typically, either Eastern Europe or Brazil,
Yeah.
and some of them have been here for 20 plus years, and their English was still very, very basic, and I couldn't wrap my head around it. And I, spoke to some of them, and we kind of talked about it, and they say, well, they don't really speak English because they stick together with their community, which is obviously fine, but I think price that you pay for that, it doesn't force you to speak English and to kind of fine tune your ear for the different accents and pronunciations and things like that. And so that's why I said, no Czech or Slovakian friends for the first number of years. And that really helped me.
And that helped you. Yeah. And what about, so you mentioned that, so back home in the Czech Republic, it was your grandma and school that helped you with English. I mean, it's really funny to hear that your grandma was actually really into languages. That's fantastic.
Yeah, she was into lots of things, and but she wanted us, me and my brother and later my sister, to be just to be good, and she believed in languages because my grandfather was truck driver, and he used to drive all around the world, and so he got to see different countries. Back then during communism and so on, it was very hard to get anywhere. So he had the opportunity to actually travel, and he was telling us these stories. He went to France and France and Belgium and Spain and Italy, and like, wow, these fantastic stories. So I think that she wanted us to she believed in languages, to put it simply. I remember, in English there's this the sound, right?
Yeah.
And you need to, like, there's no way around it, and that people butcher it in so many different ways. And I remember my grandma was beating me almost, with pencil. She was like, no. And she always looked at me like, very good. Look at my tongue. It's the. And I had to do it 100 times. And, I remember during the summer, I had to go every day for half an hour. And we read all these textbooks and things, and the sounds, that was her favorite exercise. But I'm so grateful for that, because as you know better than me, there are 100 ways to butcher it, and yeah, these are my memories.
I guess it's true, and it's really funny to hear that there are certain letters or certain combinations, certain sounds that are just so difficult to master if you are not a native speaker. And for me, it was the TH as well. And then the other one, although it wasn't as difficult, but again, I had to pay attention whenever I was speaking, was the W sound, the W, which, we don't have that in German or in Hungarian. We only have the V sound.
In Czech, yeah.
So that took me a while to master as well. But now I catch myself in my native languages to be using the W sounds, instead of the V.
Hey, and you know what? This is I think it's partially my fault as well, but until I moved here, I didn't know, and mind you, there's like 10 years of learning English. I didn't know there was difference between the V, pronouncing the V and W. I must have, I don't know if it just went by me in the classes, or if it wasn't taught properly or something. And how I found out is that I was watching the Czech version of X Factor, and there were some girls singing, and her English was really good. And one of the judges pointed this out because he kind of traveled with his band around the world, so his English was fantastic, even though it was all in Czech. And he was telling her, did you know that there is a difference between pronouncing V and W? And I was like, what? In maybe with 13 years of learning English, how is that possible? I never noticed that. I don't know if they didn't teach me that, or if it just went by me. But yeah, this is how I found out. I totally agree with you. It's just, And strangely enough, I still sometimes, it kind of slips in for some reason that I pronounce W as V. Very rarely, but sometimes I catch myself. But as you say, totally, when I speak to my mom on Skype or something, they laugh at me because apparently my Czech accent is just funny now, and I'm kind of rounding words, and because I don't speak in Czech very rarely, maybe a couple times a month, my Czech is becoming worse.
It's true, actually, and it's really funny how living in another country and usually speaking another language, how that influences your native tongue. And I do see it myself as well. And because I'm also a teacher, it's actually even more difficult for me, because as a teacher, I'm trying to, whenever possible, I try to use the target language with my clients, because I try to immerse themselves as much as possible into, my native language, because, they don't get the chance to be there like for days or for weeks or for years like we do here in the UK.
Yeah.
Those, that the hour or an hour and a half or whatever much time we manage to spend together, I try to use as much as possible the target language. And when I do, well, depending clearly on the level of the client, I have to sometimes, speak a bit slower or be a bit more articulate and watch my pronunciation. I try to be, as close to the original pace and the original pronunciation clearly as possible. But I have to slow down. And sometimes my family, they say to me, hey, Gabi, it's time to forget that you are in a lesson. You are now speaking to us. So,
right.
So I guess it's a side effect of being a teacher, a foreign language teacher in another country.
Yeah. And, there is, before our interview, I was thinking about kind of relevant stories and kind of my own observations and realizations that I would like to share. And one thing that I thought I will share with you and ask you also as well, so it's kind of a question as well. I wonder whether you agree with this, because many people, and I did as well, focus on accent. People become sort of not obsessed, but they just want to sound native, right? And I did as well, because as a foreigner, you come to a different country, and obviously you have an accent. And when I got into coaching, it used to, I wouldn't say bother me, but it used to worry me that because of my accent, it would somehow hinder my success, or like people wouldn't take me seriously, or it would kind of give away that I'm not from here. And I remember there was a few weeks when I was sort of obsessed about it. I was downloading all these accent programs and so on. And then I actually had a coaching session with my coach about it. And I kind of realized that it's much more important to this is my opinion, to actually learn the grammar properly. Like the accents it's a bonus, but I think if people were to focus on, let's say, learning the culture and learning the grammar properly, people would be okay with maybe having even a heavy accent. Whereas if people focus just on, I want to sound proper British, for example, but they don't know the culture much, and they butchering the grammar. So imagine that you have proper British accent and your grammar is terrible. I think that would just look stupid. Whereas if you have an accent, clearly you're foreign, but your grammar is perfect, then I think that's actually quite impressive. I wonder what you think of that.
Thank you very much for bringing this up, because I was going to ask you about this as well. And I actually had a chat about this with my husband the other day, and I was asking him about how he feels about accents, and we had a really interesting discussion. And we well, I came across an article a while ago about accents and how the Brits, when they learn a foreign language, how some of them
especially in school, how they feel that if they learn the language accent-free, or they try to learn, say, French or German, and they try to work on their accent, they may feel that they give up their identity. And it can, it's a tricky business, accent. And I personally, my experience with this is that I also tried to work on my accent. And the reason why I found it important is that, I don't know, it's not necessarily that I want to be like a Brit, but I want to, I don't know, it just feels that, I get closer to them, and I really want to show that, that I'm grateful that they accepted me, and I'm grateful that I get all these opportunities, and I'm grateful to be able to give back to them and to the community. And somehow I feel that through accent and through making the effort on working on my accent, I feel that I'm trying to be similar to them. And then at the same time, I'm asking questions about, do I give up my identity? Because after all, I am German and I am Hungarian. I can't, I don't want to hide that. But at the same time, when we work on accents, it may feel that, we want to hide our background. So I'm confused about this topic as well.
Well, I think there is I think grammar, and by the way, my grammar is far from perfect, but grammar should be priority. Accent is, you're totally right. Having a good accent or clear accent is like, as people should understand you. That should be the level people should aim at least, to that in terms of grammar, accent. But totally learning a proper accent, if people have time for it. And then you probably know, better than me, that with age we lose the kind of acuity or the sensitivity to the different tonality, and the older we are, the harder it is to actually pick up on these subtle tones and kind of sounds in the accent. Maybe not necessarily in English, because it is quite, it's wise, it's a simpler language. But for example, Japanese or Chinese, some of these languages, the tonality is super important. That can change totally what the word means. But people, if they want to, they shouldn't feel insecure about their accent. This is my thing. If you feel insecure, then great, work on it. Make yourself sound as native as you wish. But I just think that grammar should come first, and also understanding the culture and the etiquette and so on.
Exactly. Grammar and also vocabulary. So as long as I always say, especially at the beginning, that, as long as you can get yourself understood, you're on the right track. And after that, you can work on polishing a little bit here and there. But the point of having a conversation is getting yourself understood and understand the other person. And as long as that's working, then you are certainly on the right track. And accent is just is another interesting part of the story, but I really don't think that that's the most important bit. So I agree with you on that.
Yeah. By the way, I think your accent is great. So
it's a work in progress, and I guess it's a never-ending journey when it comes to learning a language. It's a never-ending journey. But then moving on to cultures that you just mentioned, that you feel also is an important part of the story. I wonder, so now you do business here in the UK, you work with successful entrepreneurs and business owners and corporates. So what do you, you moved over here when you were 21. I don't know, did you notice any subtle differences between I don't know, attitudes to business and work in general between the Czech Republic and the UK?
Oh, totally, totally. Actually, I haven't been back home for quite a few years now. I'm going in a couple of weeks
Yeah.
for a short holiday. So I think it will be cultural shock. But so the cultures are very different, you know. For example, so I invite my parents every now and then to come and visit, and my mom is always amazed how pleasant and polite everyone is in shops and so on, and the customer service is great. And I'm like, okay. And I remember when I went back home a few years back, and like the I will probably annoy some people, but like in many places, the customer service in shops were just terrible. It's just like, I'm not like they just clearly I was bothering them just being there, and they didn't hide it at all. Not everywhere. Somewhere that people are amazing was really nice. I would just say Czech people are a little bit more kind of transparent with their emotions, which is not always a good thing. But in here, so the culture, I think people are people seem to be, you know, very polite.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, you know, you caught me off guard a little bit. And what are the differences? And so, by the way, in business, I've only been running my own business for 5 years, and I don't really have an experience in running business back home.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but kind of the pleasantness of people, like people have this, you know, you meet someone and everyone is very polite, and there's, even though it may be a sort of a mask of kind of the pleasantries and everything, I think back home people are a little bit more upfront and direct,
Yeah.
which is typical when you go to kind of Europe, and further Eastern Europe you go, the more I think direct the cultures are. And yeah, so this is kind of the main observation I have.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, and I have the same experience, so I can confirm that German people tend to be a bit more direct as well. Hungarians come across as more direct, although formality is a lot more distinct in those two countries. What I mean.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
So despite, even in the language, we have this, the formal and informal way of saying hello and saying goodbye and asking how are you, and just the general, like having two different yous, like am I talking to one person? Am I talking to more than one person? Is it a formal situation? Is it an informal situation? So all these subtle differences would that comes with formality or informality, and despite that we do come across as being a bit more direct, and here people beat around the bushes a little bit more, I find.
So and you totally reminded me, I don't know how come I forgot about this, but yeah, like back in Czech we have these are two sort of almost languages, right? Formal and informal. And it's so, because I haven't been there for so long, it's been 13, 14 years now. Occasionally I need to interact by email or something, with someone in Czech. And I find it so strange to write in this formal language. It feels so I don't want to say pretentious, but it's just like so fluffed up. It's so weird.
It is.
And then because I don't speak Czech really, like as I said, a couple of times a month maybe, I lost that. Not kind of the languages are blending together. If I'm writing an email or something, it kind of is jumping from formal to informal, and I have to really think about it. Needless to say, the grammar, as you said, is just so much more complex. Is whether you're speaking to a man or to a woman, the words are changing to one person or to a group, or it's just much more complex. And I must say, I've lost my grammar skills.
Yeah, and what about like another common topic that comes up when we talk about different cultures and their attitudes to, well, not just business, but, you know, just general way of doing things in life. Is there any difference between timekeeping and, for example, meetings, like what time you should be arriving, what's polite, what's not polite? Do you have any experiences with that, or something that you found really different here in the UK and that you had to get used to?
So, to be very honest, for me, punctuality is very important. So I don't really care what country I'm in. If we have a meeting at, I don't know, 1 o'clock, then we have a meeting at 1 o'clock, and I'll be there. It rarely happens I'm late. Occasionally, because of some unforeseen circumstances, but I expect people to be on time as well. Mind you, 14 years ago, it was a different time. Like the era of mobile phones wasn't as, smartphones went around, and everything was much more chilled. Plus, I'm from a tiny village up the hill, so I'm comparing that to London, these days. So I don't know if it's comparable, but I would say back home the attitude is maybe a little bit more relaxed. But again, I haven't been there for so long, so
really interesting. Of course, yeah. Now listen, if someone wants to learn Czech, because believe it or not, there are some people who want to, and I'm constantly surprised, although I really shouldn't be, that there are people who want to learn Hungarian actually, and not just for personal reasons, because most of my clients who learned Hungarian, they did it because someone like in the family was Hungarian, or their spouse was Hungarian, and I only had a few of them who learned Hungarian for business because they work for a global company, and they've got offices in Hungary as well, so they have to travel back and forth, or perhaps they need to stay a few days a week regularly in Hungary. So there are people who would like to learn Czech as well. What do you think? Like, what would be your advice to them?
I would say, I just honestly, just the idea of if I had to learn my language from scratch, they have no idea what they're getting themselves into. And I respect every foreigner who speaks Czech she speaks Czech on any level. I respect them so much because it really is so complex language. I would say go there for a short holiday, travel around a little bit, and see if kind of that's sort of a cultural country that you would like to visit often enough. It would make putting thousands of hours into learning the language worthwhile.
I know it's a huge topic, and I also feel massive respect really for anyone who tries to master Hungarian, and there are some really good examples that you can actually do it, and vice versa. Like Brits, they can learn a language as well, and they can be brilliant. And what I find about anyone who tries to say anything in Hungarian, because it's such a small language, and it's a relatively unusual language, or an uncommon language for foreigners to speak. Hungarians are very appreciative. Whenever they hear someone, it's like, gosh, they talk to their heart immediately once they just say hello or thank you very much. I mean, they are absolutely smitten and taken away by it. They are really, really appreciative.
Yeah, and absolutely. And you know what? Actually, we have in Prague, we have some very well-known universities, and actually many foreigners go there and study, especially medicine, in Czech, which is just that's something I can't wrap my head around.
Massive respect to them. Exactly. Now, listen, Thomas, to wrap it up, I've got a quick fire question.
Before, actually, there was something I was going to share with you, if I may. It will be very quick. And it's I think told like a misconception, not just British people have, but I think everyone in here. When we meet someone and we hear an accent, what's one of the first questions that we ask?
Where are you from?
Exactly, right. And this is so interesting, especially if you're British, and this is very natural reaction, very natural, question to ask. Oh, you hear someone is from here. Let me be almost like curious and welcoming and appreciative that they're from somewhere else. Let me ask them, where are you from? But I wonder what you have to say to this. And I think for many foreigners, especially if their English is not great, and they kind of feel, many foreigners come here and feel sort of insecure about it, or maybe inferior in a way. It's kind of like being in someone else's house, right?
Yeah.
And then the question, so, oh, where are you from? I couldn't help myself. But for the first few years, what I really heard was, oh, you're not one of us. I wonder where you're from. And I was always like, oh, why did they have to ask me that? So I would suggest to kind of leave the question. It's perfectly normal question, but I would leave it for later, as almost like you didn't notice that they have an accent or they're from somewhere else, because it may, I may not, but it may make the people that you're asking kind of very insecure about for a moment, because it is, you're foreigners, so the first few months or few years are very kind of like, oh, I know my English is not great. I know I'm butchering the grammar. My accent is very strong, and many people feel quite insecure about it, and that question kind of pokes right into it.
It's true. And the other thing that some of my German clients, I mean British clients who learn German, or not just British, but anyone really of any nationality, and they learn German, and they keep saying to me, not so much the Hungarians, they keep saying to me that they got to a certain level and they feel rather confident in using the language, and they want to finally start practicing it with colleagues in like real life situations, and they are being constantly corrected. No, this is not how you say it. You should say it this way. You should say it that way, and that's another layer of the of a similar experience. Making I always say that as long as you understand what the other person is saying, we shouldn't feel the urge to correct them just because they made a little mistake, because like you say, it may make them feel a bit insecure, and the point is, having a conversation, and do we understand each other? Actually, we do. So why would I bother the person with all these subtle, mistakes that they make that, are totally harmless? And I think the Brits are really good with that, or generally the English-speaking people, because they are so used to foreign tongues. But this question, like, where are you from? Yeah, it can get right to right to.
And to what you said, I remember when I got here, and the first place I lived in was Harlington, which is a little village up north from London. And I went there. I'm very kind of extroverted, so I befriended people, and I was invited to this house party at the neighbors, and I was there. My English was just so bad. And I remember talking to this man for maybe 5 minutes, telling him some story. I don't know what it was about. I was trying to explain myself, kind of finding random words. And I was really struggling. He was looking at me so patiently. And after maybe 5 minutes, he said, "Thomas, I have no idea what you're talking about." So I appreciated that very much, that he was just hanging in there, trying to get any sense of what I was saying. I don't think I was very successful at conveying my message, but I appreciated that very much.
These things happen, I guess. Yeah, it happens with everyone who ever tries to crack another language, I guess. Now, anything else, Thomas, that you would like to mention before we wrap up?
No, let's do the rapid fire then.
Let's do the rapid fire. Listen, London or Prague?
London.
Hey, lager or bitter?
Ooh, lager.
Lager, okay. Earl Grey or English breakfast tea?
I'm not fond of either. Oh, sorry, English breakfast tea. I thought like full English breakfast. Or English breakfast, that's my thing. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Tea
no
with-
milk, no sugar. European style, or Eastern European style, I would say.
Yeah, that was my next question. Like tea with milk or tea with lemon?
I would, if I have to choose one of those, it would be lemon, but never milk in my tea.
Vindaloo or korma?
Coma.
Korma, okay. Ice hockey or football?
Ice hockey. I don't know anything about football.
Okay, well, Chelsea or Manchester United?
It means nothing to me either.
Prague or Pilsen?
Are we talking about the cities?
Yes.
Prague.
Pork roast or beefsteak?
Or beefsteak. I don't really.
And rare, medium, or well done?
Medium rare.
Is it? Okay. That's
probably medium out of the three options, yeah.
Yeah, that's
But usually I go medium rare.
medium rare. Very good. Okay, well, thank you very much, Tomas, for joining us today. And I wish you best of luck.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. It's been great fun, and I hope your listeners will find it useful.
Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Thank you very much for tuning into this episode. If you would like to get in touch with Tomas, you will find his contact details and links right here. His website is tomassvitorka.com. It is spelled TOMASSVITORKA, tomassvitorka.com. And finally, a couple of words about the sponsor of this podcast, ProLingua Global. We are a London-based boutique language training company, and we developed a unique 5-step language coaching program that really meets the needs of busy executives and business people, and it is now available in numerous languages. It's all about making the language learning process speedy, easy, but also enjoyable and highly effective. Because what we realize is that with the help of these programs, clients start to communicate more effectively and productively with foreign colleagues and partners, and they feel more confident when speaking in the target language. They are also able to follow conversations and talk freely in important situations. Plus, they are also able to understand cultural nuances and implications. Now, natural conversations are at the core of the process, which makes the whole experience very relaxed, authentic, and lifelike. And that is why the ProLingua Global Language Coaching suits really well for busy business people. Our typical clients work in the financial services industry. Now, ProLingua Global's overall mission is to help strengthen international business and trade relationships and directly contribute to British businesses becoming more successful in the short and long run. You can find out more on www.prolingua.global, as well as on social media, and you will find all the direct links below. My name is Gabriella Ferenci, and you can find me personally on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and on my personal website. Thank you very much for listening.